did. And I'm pleased about that. And I think the measures we're taking can create the conditions in which we can improve on that in the autumn and the budgets thereafter.
Okay, so optimism, Prime Minister, for the future as well.
Of course.
Okay, thank you very much. Dame Caroline Dinage.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. 86% of charities say that they are seeing an increased demand for their services. Meanwhile, fewer people and fewer corporations are actually donating to charity and their overheads are going up. What's your government going to do to support charities?
Well, it is important. I think over half of the charities have been exempted from the national insurance rises. We are looking at what we can do on sort of business rates, etc., for charities and put in the support that they need.
That's it.
Well, there's probably other things as well, and I'll write to you with further stuff.
I mean, you say that half of charities have been exempted from the national insurance contributions, but there are 44,000 registered charities that have an income over £100,000, and the National Council for Voluntary Organisations reckons that the next increase is going to put their payments at 1.4 billion. You know, these are the organisations that you said when you came into this room, you said tackling poverty is central to everything we do. These are the organisations that are doing just that in our constituencies. They're tackling poverty on the ground, they're feeding people, they're running hospices. Your next hike is one of the causes of the decline. 30% of them say they're cutting staff. Isn't it time to offer just a blanket carve out to charities?
No, I don't think it is. But in terms of the point you make about charities in all of our constituencies working hard in these areas, I completely accept that. And one of the things that we launched last Thursday was the Civil Society Covenant, where we got many, many thousands of charities together and did what we promised in opposition, which was to bring the government and the charities together in a partnership through that covenant and demonstrate to them the sort of work that we can do together. I have to say, they felt that that was the first time it had ever happened with a government prepared to work with charities in that way. It was a very good thing, very, very well received, and an example, to my mind, of the sort of partnership working we're going to have in this country. We're going to bring around the change that we need to bring about in the speed we've got available, because we have to always remember we inherited both a broken economy plus broken public services. No government's inherited that combination for decades upon decades and decades and decades, and that's a very difficult working environment.
But you're now attempting to break our charities. I mean, just this month, Marie Curie Hospice in Liverpool closed their inpatient unit permanently. Your civil society covenant won't put charities on a good financial footing by itself. You need to offer them a carve-out for this national insurance rise. I mean, quite simply, it is breaking them. 30% of them say they're cutting staff. Only 50% of them now feel positive about the future, Prime Minister. Can't you do something?
Well, it is important just to bear in mind why we had to do what we did on national insurance. We looked through the books and we found £22 billion missing. And we had to do something about it because that's a serious problem.
But you can't do that on
we addressed that at the budget. At the same time, we used the money from that NICS increase to invest hugely in our NHS. Hence, we promised 2 million extra appointments in the first year of Labour government. We've done 4.5 million. That takes the pressure off many charities.
I want to talk about charities, and you're basically balancing the book on the back of things like children's hospices. Can I also talk about...
No, we're clearing up the mess of the last government.
On the back of children's hospices. Charities also depend upon individuals giving generously. Do you know which is the most generous constituency in the country?
No.
It's Sheffield Hallam, 1.9% of income of the average.
Congratulations to Sheffield Hallam.
I know, great, right? Do you know which are the least three generous? The least three generous are Kensington and Bayswater, Chelsea and Fulham, and Holborn and St Pancras, Prime Minister, each at around about 0.5% of their income, about half of the average of the country as a whole. Now, we know that you and your colleagues aren't adverse to being on the receiving end of a little bit of philanthropic giving. How would you persuade people in wealthy areas like yours just to dig a bit deeper?
That's the first time I've been presented with those figures, but clearly in Holborn and St Pancras and other places we need to up our game, and we will do so.
So have you got a plan to promote philanthropy?
Well, the first I hadn't seen that readout of figures by constituency before.
Not just in your constituency, across the country. What can we do to encourage corporations and individuals just to support charities a bit more?
Oh, I think we should do everything we can to get them to support charities and individuals.
Like what? Everything we can, like what?
Well, we'll go to Sheffield Hallam and we will find out what's happening there that clearly isn't happening in Holborn and St Pancras, and take it away as a learning experience.
Is this something your civil society covenant might be looking at?
Yes. I think one of the most important things is how government works with charities supporting what they do. We've had examples of charities rolling out particular initiatives that they've brought to us. So one of them was the Macmillan initiative on giving people guided support to the charities that they might need if they're diagnosed, in that particular case with cancer, but with other diagnoses. They did that as a local plan. We've taken that now as a nationally rolled out plan working with those charities.
Very, very good.
And that's an example
Excellent.
of the
Good
covenant
example.
working together.
Can I move you on to the BBC? Because that's a bit of a regressive tax in itself, the licence fee. What's your view on how it might be reformed? And also, we were promised the BBC Charter review at the beginning of the year. What's holding it up?
Well, we're going through the review, and it'll obviously come to its conclusion. We keep an open mind about what we need to do with the licence fee, but we are working closely with the BBC. We're going through that review.
Will we see the consultation paper on the BBC Charter review before October?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll certainly write to you and let you know.
Well, in December we were told it would be early in the new year. A fortnight we were told it would be later this year. So
I will try and get a more accurate date for you.
Do you know what's holding it up?
No, I'll try and get you a more accurate date.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Dame Caroline. Ruth Cadbury MP.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. In answer to questions on poverty earlier, you acknowledged the need that earnings growth and economic growth has to happen across every part of our country. Now, away from large city centres, people who don't have access to a private car are dependent on minimal and sometimes non-existent local bus services to get to work, training, take their children to childcare, and to get to affordable shops. In the Transport Committee inquiry on buses, we've had evidence that to our inquiry that 56% of small towns in the southwest and northeast are complete public transport deserts, and that this lack of buses impacts on the growth of those small towns. So how is the government going to ensure that its current bus reforms actually close the gaps around the country in the way that is happening in Ireland, and that the buses bill doesn't just prevent more decline in the inadequate status quo?
Well, firstly, I think I'm right in saying more people use buses than any other form of transport, and therefore it's hugely important, particularly in rural areas, but just across the piece. And there is a direct correlation between that sort of travel and building the local economy, so it's vitally important. We did invest a lot of money in the budget in buses, and the spending review set out, I think it was £900 million of investment. But there's also, in direct answer to your question, I think a number of other measures that we've taken that are important. Capping at £3 the bus fare until March 27 is really important. But equally, in the bus services bill is the socially necessary services, because it's not just the price, it's the route. And too many times in the past have been examples of profitable routes having too many buses and non-profitable routes not having any buses at all. So having that provision in is very important, as is the expansion of the ability of local representatives, mayors, but also other local authorities to take more control over the buses in their area, all of which I think will change the landscape here.
It's true that the buses bill is changing the governance structures, and it's also true that socially necessary routes are identified. Our concern is, and the evidence we received, is that might just about hold the status quo, while we've got many places that already have no bus service and many more places that have no evening and no weekend bus service. So could I just ask, Prime Minister, that you look at the buses bill and other potential initiatives available to you to ensure that buses and bus use grows around England outside of London rather than just stays as it is?
Yes, certainly. And as I said, we put quite a lot of investment into the budget, but you're absolutely right, that needs to do more than maintain the status quo. I don't think it was a status quo, I think it was probably reducing, but it needs to more than stabilise the situation and improve the situation.
Thank you very much, Ms Cadbury. Nick Smith, MP.
Thank you, Prime Minister. The Chancellor established long-term measures to boost our economy. The industrial strategy provides important detail, as did the spending review. However, truth is, some of our former industrial areas are much harder to revitalise. So, for instance, in the South Wales valleys, almost a quarter of young people are economically inactive. Will the government look at concentrated regional investment for areas like this? Proud places which once powered our country still need a helping hand.
Yes, I think this is really important, and obviously this is long-term issues in communities that have been overlooked, in my view, for a very, very long time. I think there are a number of measures that we are taking that are really important. To give some examples, Cardiff and Newport investment zone will drive growth, particularly in manufacturing in that area, much needed skills that are transferable. There's a Newport semiconductor cluster which will support hundreds of highly skilled jobs. You'll be well aware of all the support that's going into Tata Steel, into Port Talbot, and Tata, the owner there, that we're working with very closely. And I was very pleased to see the electric arc furnace work start just last week or the week before. But in addition to that, and really to tie it to the previous questions, we also need to invest across Wales and South Wales in particular in transport and rail across the region.
Thank you for the answers, particularly on Newport. That's very close to the eastern valleys where I'm from. But also, Prime Minister, can we invest in the future in a much more localised ways in the valleys? There's 750,000 people there. They need good support in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And the transport improvement, the local growth work that we're doing, and the empowering of local authorities and working with the local with the Welsh Labour government central to that in terms of what we're doing.
Thank you. From Wales to Scotland, Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Prime Minister. The Scottish Affairs Committee has recently been looking at those former industrial areas in Scotland, and we've observed that persistent long-term poverty and poor outcomes occurs in many of our former industrial areas, particularly those that are not close to major towns. So what steps is the government taking to ensure that the benefits of the industrial strategy reach those communities? And what work are you doing with the Scottish Government? But also, what is the role of the Scotland Office in helping to deliver those outcomes that we want to see?
Some of the levers to deal with poverty are obviously devolved, some are not. The ones that aren't, we can operate and pull, and we will. So that's your minimum wage, the changes to universal credit, employment rights bill, and some of the other schemes like warm homes. So there are things I think directly the government can do. We, at the budget last year, set out the biggest devolution settlement for Scotland, best part of £50 billion per year. So there is the money there for the Scottish Government to get on and take some of the other necessary measures, and I'm not convinced that they're doing so. Our job, notwithstanding our political differences, to work with the Scottish Government to deliver, particularly on good, well-paid jobs in areas that need them. That we are doing. One of the first things I did as Prime Minister was to go to Scotland, in fact, the very first visit within days, to say to the First Minister that notwithstanding our political differences, I saw my job to be delivering for Scotland, and therefore we'd work with him and his government wherever we could.
Nick Smith, MP.
Hello again, Prime Minister. The best way out of poverty is a good job. In recent years, there's been a cybersecurity course in Ebervale, cyber attacks on Marks and Spencer highlight how crucial this sector is. Archie Norman from M&S outlined the enormous surface attack which companies face, often after outsourcing and offshoring of cybersecurity. So could you consider how the government and the private sector might collaborate on this to expand technology and cyber security jobs here in the UK? This could reduce our tech risk and be a pipeline for jobs for younger people for the future.
Yes, firstly, I think it's a really important issue because there are very many more cyber attacks than most people appreciate, and there are serious security risks. Marks and Spencer is an example. There are plenty of others, including concerted cyber attacks on the government and on our public services, which we deal with day in, day out. So it's in our interests to work both with the private sector, which we are doing on initiatives in very many constituencies to build up those jobs and develop the skills that are going to be necessary, but also working with our security and intelligence services, and in some cases with our military as well, in terms of the work that we're doing on cyber. So this is an area where you can see room for expansion. We put in the money at the spending review on this because I'm very concerned about the increasing risk of cyber attacks across the board.
Mr. Smith.
Just to emphasise, however, this issue of outsourcing and offshoring of cybersecurity, if you could please go back to the private sector about that, I think that will help a lot across our country.
Yes, I'll do
Prime
that.
Minister, are you specifically looking at any, promoting any training in places like the Welsh Valleys in order to promote cyber training for young people to help build skills in those areas Mr. Smith's highlighted?
Yes, there are initiatives in...
Have you got any specifics you can give? It would appreciate you may not have that.
I know there are, but
think.
what I'll do is I'll make sure they're available to the committee.
Thank you. Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you again, Prime Minister. Many of the communities we're talking about in both Scotland and in Wales have had difficulties now for quite some time. This is not a new problem. These are obviously very hard to reach communities in that sense, but many of them actually possess quite high levels of manufacturing skills that we could use in the to promote the industrial strategy. So I just wonder if there are any specific things that we can point to that would help these communities to get out of this difficulty, because as I mentioned earlier, the problem seems to be particularly acute for those communities that are not close to a larger town where they can feed off what's happening there and where they have transport links that they can access to.
Yeah, I think local growth plans are part of the answer to that. I think making sure we retain the skills and the jobs in the places we've got them is hugely important. Two examples of that. Grangemouth is an area where we put quite a significant government amount of money behind it recently. Grangemouth, it seems to me, I mean, there's a problem obviously with the winding down of the refinery at Grangemouth, but it is a huge opportunity in terms of the potential of Grangemouth, and therefore for that community and many, many communities around it, I see it as a huge opportunity. I think we've got 10 strands of work going on there to identify the best possible way forward for Grangemouth, which we shouldn't see as some sort of charity case. It is an incredible opportunity in Scotland. Equally, the work around Aberdeen as we transition from oil and gas to renewables, the potential there is huge for using the same pipework for carbon capture as is currently used for going the other way, if you like, and the same skills and the same workforce for decades to come. So I think there is huge potential in Scotland if we get this right. I would also add that thanks to our India trade deal, most whisky distillers in Scotland are saying to me they're now going to struggle to produce enough whisky to export. It's a problem they are absolutely loving, but it just shows how the trade deal has direct impact on that issue in Scotland in particular.
Ms Ferguson.
Interestingly, many of the whisky distilleries will also tell you that they have the problem of being able to provide housing for their employees, but perhaps we don't want to go to that one at the moment. But I wonder whether you think that the new jobs coming forward, both from Grangemouth specifically and also in the transitioning of the North Sea, are able to keep up with the number of jobs that are being lost?
I think they can, but I think it needs additional work, one of which is to value the local supply chains and to ensure that that is measured when contracts for procurement are put out, because I think particularly at the moment, having secure supply chains in Scotland is vitally important, and therefore one aspect, whether it's Grangemouth or elsewhere, can then feed a lot of other communities, a lot of other jobs in quite a wide range of areas, but only if we value the fact that they are Scottish jobs in Scotland, where in my view the investment and the contract should be, not least because that then supports the communities through those jobs, and those with the jobs are then paying tax back into Scotland rather than paying it in another country. So we need to value it and weigh it in the work that we're doing on contracts in particular around the main clusters that we're talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andy Slaughter, MP.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. People of limited means used to rely on legal aid to navigate through the criminal and civil justice systems, as I think you know. The 2012 LASPO Act destroyed much of that, leaving an inadequate patchwork of advice and representation and longer delays in the civil courts, which is the subject of a Justice Committee report published today. No one is expecting the government to suddenly restore the billions taken out of legal aid, but is there a comprehensive plan for ensuring access to justice, or will this be more of a patch and mend job?
Well, it's a massive problem, as ever. There's no department that we inherited that is anything other than broken. We are putting more money in. We're focusing first on the criminal side, putting in more money on legal aid because, as you will know, there are terrible backlogs in our courts, and we have to sort that out with more money going in, and then to focus on things like housing, where within the civil sphere there's a particular problem. So there is more money going in, it's focused in that way, but we are looking at a broader review of how we can have better and quicker access to justice, because it's far too slow.
Thank you. Could I just move on to reoffending then? We've got terrible reoffending rates in this country. People leave prison without a job, a place to stay, or support with addiction and mental health. Some become a nuisance on our high street, committing further offences and quickly finding themselves back in prison. But while you're building new prisons and substituting control and punishment in the community for custody, what plans does the government have to cut the numbers committing criminal offences by reducing reoffending, stopping the revolving door that destroys the lives of victims and perpetrators alike?
The first thing is more mental health and substance abuse support in prison whilst people are in prison, which we're putting in and does make a difference. I think for those that are out of prison and serving their sentences in the community, there's an initiative we've launched with councils to try and bridge them into well-paid work at the end of that part of their sentence, which is shown to have material support, and then putting a better package of support around those actually leaving prison when they do leave prison. So they're the three things that we're doing at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're now going to move on to discussing some of the international issues that you've been dealing with, Prime Minister. And Andy Slaughter is going to kick off with that as well.
Well, slight change of tack, Prime Minister. Every day it's clearer that the civilian population of Gaza is being starved, killed and displaced in a systematic yet indiscriminate way. The steps the UK has taken thus far have had no effect on the criminal actions of the Israeli government. Indeed, these have accelerated and spread to the West Bank. What further steps will the government take to protect Palestinians from mass killing and destruction of their homes and communities? And will these include recognition of Palestine as a state and acting on our obligations under the ICJ advisory opinion?
Firstly, we need, in direct answer to the first part of your question, we need a ceasefire, and we need it straight away, because that will create the space for the remaining hostages to be released. They've been held for a very, very long time. It will create the space for aid to get in at speed and at volume, which is desperately needed. And equally importantly, create the space for a political process, which, to my mind, is the only long-term way to get a sustained peace in Gaza, and we mustn't forget what's happening in the West Bank as well. I do think, in answer to the second part of your question, that it is important that all countries, including ours, play a leading part in bringing about the peaceful settlement that we want. And obviously, on the question of recognition, we are and have been for a long time committed to that as part of the process, as a contribution to the peace process at a time most conducive to the prospects of peace. We are working with others on how we get from where we are now to a two-state solution, which is the only viable option to my mind. And I think that we need to use the coming weeks to push further on credible plans for the next phase of Gaza. If we get to a ceasefire, we need to push past that and on to better regionally supported reconstruction efforts and supporting of the Arab plan. And I think we should play a leading part in that.
I think, if I may, you began by talking about a ceasefire, which is absolutely right, because that is the sine qua non here. But we hear a lot of words, and there's been another statement, I understand today, a joint statement with 25 countries, but people are asking for action. You must hear that, and certainly the Foreign Secretary hears that every week in the House of Commons, and we have yet to see any steps that have led the Israelis to take action on a ceasefire. Indeed, the opposite is the case. Every morning brings new horrors and new atrocities, new displacements, new deaths of civilians queuing for food in that way. And they're looking to you and to this government to try and provide something which makes that ceasefire happen. What will that be?
Firstly, let me be clear, the situation on the ground in Gaza is intolerable on so many levels. And we make that absolutely clear in all of our exchanges with Israel and with other countries. Whether that's the deaths for those that are queuing for aid, whether it's the plans to force Palestinians to live in certain areas or excluded from certain areas, they're all intolerable and absolutely wrong in principle. We have taken action, as you know, in terms of sanctions, in terms of what we're doing with arms sales, and we are working hard with allies to ensure we bring about a ceasefire. That is not straightforward, as you will appreciate. It is important that we're working with the Americans on this, as you would expect. But we need to get to that ceasefire to create the conditions for everything else that needs to happen, and we'll continue to do so. It is a really important part of the work that we're doing on a day-to-day basis.
We should have responded to the advisory opinion by now. It's over a year since that was issued.
Well, I mean, there's a lot in it, and we're working through it, and we will respond in due course.
Thank you very much. Dame Emily Thornbury.
No one can deny that our relations with the Europeans are a lot better than they were a year ago. It's much warmer. We've had the state visit of Macron. We've had Chancellor Merz and his new treaty. We've got the E3. We've got a European summit that was a great success. So since we're on a roll, what are we going to do next? If we can agree food standards with the Europeans, at the next EU summit, can we agree some others? Can we agree something on medicines or chemicals or anything else, really?
Well, firstly, I do think we've made real progress, and I'm pleased that we have. We said we would reset the relations with our partners in Europe, and we've done that through a successful summit in May. And that had 10 strands to it, including an SPS agreement, which will mean lower prices in supermarkets across the country, but also really important work on defence and security. In addition to that, we've led with the French the Coalition of the Willing, which has shown our ability to pull allies together in response to the conflict in Ukraine. And that strong E3 nucleus, if you like, we had, as you say, Chancellor Merz here last week, President Macron the week before, and that core E3 is now much stronger than it's been for some considerable time. In answer to your question, I think the summit is to be a yearly summit, and it's iterative, and therefore it's not just to monitor what we have agreed, it's to go further. I would like to take up your example of medicines, to do more and more on medicines. There are other areas where I think we could and should go further. I think many creative people who are crossing borders for their artistry, their music, whatever it may be, on a temporary basis. They're not going to another country for any significant period of time, are still finding it too difficult to get in and out of a country. I hope we can make some progress there. They're not the only areas, but these are common sense changes that we could make to our arrangements with the EU, which had, in my view, very little to do with the vote in 2016, and where by resetting the mood in Europe, we now have a chance of going further.
I mean, what would a better relationship look like in terms of defence with the European Union?
We need, firstly, to ensure that the commitments to spend more are common across Europe, which I think we are doing. We certainly achieved that at the NATO summit. But then we need to do more than that, because if we're going to all spend more on defence, we need to cooperate and coordinate in how we're bringing about the capability. That was intensely part of the discussion with the Chancellor of Germany last week and with President Macron, which is how do we three countries in particular coordinate. So you'll have seen when President Macron was here, we agreed that on nuclear for the first time, we would look at how we might coordinate better. I'm absolutely clear in my own mind that NATO has been the cornerstone of our peace for decades. If it's to continue to be, and it's our duty to make sure that it is, it requires some more heavy lifting from the Europeans, that is why I sort of led from the front in trying to get others into the place of cooperating, coordinating more on the capability. We can learn a lot from Ukraine. A lot of capability was made available to Ukraine, but actually it wasn't as useful as it could have been, because in years gone by there wasn't that level of coordination, and I think we can fix that now.
So can I ask you just about something else in relation to defence, and I think we have to ask you about this, about that shocking data breach for Afghan. I wondered, do you think there was a better way in which the previous government could have dealt with the data breach? Do you think that a super injunction was the right way? Do you think there was a better way of dealing with it?
It was a shocking inheritance. We inherited the breach, we inherited the injunction, and we inherited a secret scheme. A number of us were quite uncomfortable about that, in answer to your question, which is why we set up the review to ask the question, is it necessary for these arrangements still to be in place, the RIMA review, and that produced an answer which was no, and therefore the injunction was lifted. And we put in place other measures, as you would expect, to ensure that data is more securely held in the MOD. But it was it was a breach we inherited, and I think the Defence Select Committee is looking at it now, and I hope that members of the previous administration will appear before that committee and give their explanations.
Dame Emily. I just wonder why it took a year to unpick this super injunction. Can you give us any more information about that timeline?
Yes, it was a very complicated review, and having got into the situation where lives were potentially at risk, I wanted the review to be as careful as it could be.
So you undertook the review because you were uncomfortable about the super injunction?
Yes.
But you wanted to know what the impact of removing it would be?
Of course, because that was a risk assessment which held people's lives in it.
Decision made on entry into government?
Pretty soon afterwards, yeah.
So you briefed in the first briefed as Prime Minister, not as Leader of the Opposition, just to be clear.
I wasn't briefed as Leader of the Opposition.
Okay.
To be fair, it wasn't.
Just be clear for the record.
It wasn't offered to me, but to be fair to the last government, they did offer me briefings on most things. Yeah. As it happens, they didn't offer a briefing on this, but I'm not complaining as such. I didn't get offered it, but to be fair, I did get offered briefings on a quite regular basis.
Okay, just for the clarity for the record. Chiomura MP.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Prime Minister. So the Science, Innovation and Technology Select Committee published its report into social media misinformation and harmful algorithms this month, and basically identified that the online safety regime, which this government inherited, is not fit for purpose. It's unable to tackle... So we found that the online safety regime, which this government inherited, is not fit for purpose. It's unable to tackle the spread of misinformation, and it cannot keep British citizens safe online. So can you promise my committee and everyone whose lives are impacted by the viral spread of algorithmically amplified misinformation, that the ongoing discussions on a trade agreement with the USA, or for that matter the forthcoming visits of Vice President Vance and President Trump, will not prevent you from taking the action which is so urgently needed to keep British people safe online from misinformation?
I'd say two things about that. Firstly, obviously the next tranche of protections under the Online Safety Act are coming into force imminently, and we need to look at how effective they are. But I do agree with you that we need to go further than that, and in all of our analysis here and the work that we're doing, we have to focus on our national interest, what we need to do to keep our citizens safe, and also to make sure our electoral system and democracy works effectively, because I was very worried at the last election about misinformation, and I'm very worried about the potential for misinformation in future elections in this country.
Thank you, Prime Minister. The Online Safety Act specifically does not address misinformation. That was clear evidence.
But there are provisions within it that are coming on harm, which are coming into force imminently.
Thank you very much. Dame Chi. Dame Caroline Dinage.
Just very quickly back to the BBC. It's the most trusted news brand around the world, and yet financial pressures have seen where they cut services, where the BBC World Service cuts services, they get backfilled by Chinese state media in Russia today, and that actually has a direct positive impact on favourability towards them. I just wondered, Prime Minister, do you agree with the Minister who said to my select committee that the BBC World Service bolsters national security and global security? And if you do you think more government departments should contribute to fund it?
Firstly, I do agree with the proposition. I think the World Service is really important. I also agree that whether it's in broadcasting or other areas, there are other states that are more than happy to step in if a gap is left. Somewhere in the pack I've got the funding arrangements for the World Service, but I can't put my finger on it at the moment. But we do need to make sure that we protect the World Service for those very reasons. It is a matter of national security. Sorry?
In essence, it's been increased, but by not enough.
Yeah, well, it's a constant call.
The inflation that they're sort of facing in some countries is like 30%, yeah. And the increase is very tiny. And in countries like Liberia and Lebanon and Kenya, where the BBC World Service has pulled out, Russia Today and Chinese state media have backfilled. So it's just really important to put that on your radar.
No, and I take that away, but I agree with the basic proposition that other countries are very quick to step in if we leave a gap.
One tiny quick question. Will there be a Department for Culture, Media and Sport after the next reshuffle?
Yes. And a committee to oversee it.
Prime Minister, at the beginning of this session you set out what you wanted the country to look at, and you've obviously answered a number of questions about how you might achieve that. You also, there's a lot of discussion about shake-ups at number 10. Do you think, given what you've laid out and the challenges that the country faces, there may be a benefit to bringing in ideas from outside number 10 and Whitehall, and how are you proposing to do that, if so?
Oh, I think there's always room for bringing outside ideas into number 10, whether that's from the private sector, particularly those that are running businesses, whether it's from our mayors and local representatives across the country, whether it's from making better use of parliamentarians. I think there's always room for improvement and bringing in the ideas of others. I think that where people have experience on the ground, it is invaluable to hear what they say about what we are doing, we're proposing to do, and to take that on board.
When you were in front of us at Christmas, you'd done 5 months. Now you've done a year. Given what you've just said, is there anything that you would have done differently, sitting where you are now, knowing what you know, compared with the 5th of July 2024?
Well, I mean, we had the most terrible inheritance. And I know some people don't want to hear it anymore, but if you think about Blair, he inherited an economy which was getting better, but public services which were broken. Cameron inherited good public services, but the 2008 crash. We inherited broken public services and a broken economy. So we had to take some difficult decisions in year one, and I'm not surprised that that's been hard in places. But at the same time, we've delivered incredible numbers.
Is there
when
anything
it
are you saying you would do nothing differently? Because I mean, you just talked about bringing people in from outside Whitehall to help shape the agenda. Is that something that you want to do more of?
Well, yes, but I do. I mean, if I may carry on, we've done 4.5 million extra appointments on the NHS. That is remarkable. Nobody thought it could be done. We've got a 10-year plan for the NHS.
So you talked about wanting to engage with Parliament more, for example. Is there anything in it just? I mean, it's not over a year. You had a chance to do this huge, the biggest job in the country, very big challenge, huge challenge. Is there anything you would? What different approach you've taken now you've had to sat in the hot seat?
Well, I think we could engage Parliament more, I don't doubt that, but I do think it's important for us to remind people of what improvements we have done to the NHS, what we've done on free school meals, breakfast clubs, childcare, school uniforms, what we've done in terms of the investment we've put into road and rail, the fact we got 3 trade deals with countries which many governments tried to get deals with and didn't achieve that. We've had £120 billion worth of inward investment. That is a record, all-time record of inward investment. And sometimes one of the mistakes we make is not shouting and loud enough about what we are achieving. We in the Labour
So from that
Party
list
focus on the 4%.
of achievements, what's been your best moment in the last year as Prime Minister?
Oh, walking into Downing Street and taking up the job of governing. And I wouldn't swap a single day in government for years and years in opposition.
And what about your worst moment in the last 12 months? Well, every Prime Minister has challenges, both good and bad. What's the most difficult thing you've had to deal with?
The worst thing was when my brother died, which for me brings the private and the public into a very tense conflict, and that was difficult.
Well, thank you very much, Prime Minister. Thank you for your time. We hope you get a bit of a break over the summer.
Oh, no, you didn't.
I say that hopefully every time.
I
every
thought
Prime
that at the
Minister,
beginning of the summer what it was last time, but it didn't work. So I'm not saying anything
Thank
this
you
time.
very much indeed. If the public could stay behind, please. Order. I should say the transcript should be available hopefully tonight, if not tomorrow. So thanks to our colleagues at Hans Thank you, Prime